Dana Perino, along with Morgan Ortagus, Geraldo Rivera, Jason Chaffetz, and Greg Gutfeld. It's 5 o'clock in New York City, and this is The Five. The RNC is trolling Democrats for appearing to come up short in Ohio's 12th district special election, a race that's still too close to call.
Close in Ohio 12, but no cigar, at least not yet.
This is a moral victory for the Democrats. The fact that they're this close is a moral victory for the Democrats. You want a real victory.
We got some mojo, all right? So I don't know if it's a moral victory or whatever.
Moral victory does not get you an office in Washington.
Karl Rove reacting to the election results by saying the blue wave could be receding and Republicans have a fighting chance to keep the House majority. This comes as more Democrats are distancing themselves from party leader Nancy Pelosi.
Would you back Pelosi for Speaker if you win and are in the House?
Well, I think, again, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves. As you mentioned, I got to win my race first, but we got to take a look at what's going on. We got to take a look at winning the House back in November. And then once the House is won, we have to make that decision from there.
Will you vote for Nancy Pelosi?
Probably not.
Probably not.
That's my answer. No, probably not. She doesn't speak about the issues that are important to the families of the 13th congressional district.
All right, Jason, Nancy Pelosi's got a lot of high tolerance for this kind of thing. She doesn't ever get in the middle. She just lets them say what they want because she wants to win.
Oh, she's keeping track. Are you kidding?
Oh, she's keeping track, but she keeps quiet.
She's got a tally. Right. Don't be fooling anybody. And you know what? It is a legitimate question because it's the very first thing you do as a new member of Congress. You have to go in front of the entire body and call out who is it that you're going to vote for. And the reality is the Democrats, they lack leadership. I don't think they have the right policies. And to the point of the piece beforehand, I don't think there is some big wave that's coming from the Democrats. I sat there in 2010, the year after the election after coming from the Democrats. I sat there in 2010, the year after the election after Barack Obama. They took, I think it was a net of 63 seats that switched hands, and there was this big tsunami, and I don't see any evidence of it happening this time.
All right, I was so excited to talk politics. I didn't do what I meant to do, which is to introduce Morgan.
Yeah, nice
to
work.
All of you, into the audience.
So
I was like, very rude. I'm very rude. I'm known for that, really, to being very rude. Morgan, welcome.
Thank you.
Tell us a little about yourself. Where are you from?
Well, I'm thrilled to be here. I've been watching this show for ages, so happy to be here. I live in New York City, but I'm from Florida. I am in the U.S. Navy Reserves. I've been stationed as a civilian in Saudi Arabia at the U.S. Embassy there and in Baghdad. I think we've got some fun pictures of me looking like a dork in my Kevlar.
You look safe, actually.
That's a very graceful picture of me in the Saudi Arabian desert. That's a classic. And this is me getting promoted a couple years ago.
Anchors
in the
away.
Reserve. Thank you, sir. And one of my favorite things, I'm an identical twin. I will give all of you $10 if you can guess which one is me.
You're on the left.
You're on the left.
Nope.
Wait, you look totally different.
And of course,
wait, you don't look anything
You are not
like
wearing
Ed
those
Rollins.
glasses. That is not you in the glasses. No way.
Is that Ed Rollins? Who is
that? That is Ed. So I was going to say, I moved to New York in 2006 to work on KT McFarland's Senate race as her press secretary. Ed Rollins brought me to New York, and I literally lived with KT, so it's very incestuous here at Fox News with all of the connections.
That's true. Also, you had another thing. You said you and your grandfather used to.
I said before the show that I love Geraldo because I grew up with my grandfather watching cable news, and we watched the first Iraq War with you reporting from both Iraq wars, actually. And I'm a big fan.
But I used to get, all the pretty girls said, "Oh, I love you, Geraldo." Then the pretty girls would say, "Oh, my mother loves you, Geraldo." But now the pretty girls say, "Oh, my grandmother loves you, Geraldo."
No, it's nostalgia. It's very good nostalgia.
That's me walking, talking nostalgia.
That's like, and Greg, like all the older ladies love you.
I'm like the son they allow to get away with saying really awful things.
That's true.
Like they would punish me if I was their kid, but they just treat me like, oh, he doesn't really mean that, but I do.
Anyway, Morgan, welcome to you. And would you like to comment on the state of the midterms?
So it was interesting to me. I was listening to what they were saying, moral victory, and I thought moral victory is like the new liberal version of participation trophy. Like, when you were kids, I'm the resident millennial on the panel. So when we were millennials, we were kids, we get participation trophies if we didn't do well. So I think as long as they want to keep saying moral victory, they can have their participation participation trophy, but there's one winner, there's one person that gets sworn in, and one person who's not, and it's a winner-take-all game.
I do have to say, Geraldo, that when reading Karl Rove's column this morning reminded me of August of 2006 when I was the deputy spokesperson and he was the political director and deputy chief of staff. And I'd go in and say, Karl, they're asking me again how you're feeling about the midterms. And he would tell me, well, all these things are going in our direction, and until they weren't.
Until they weren't. Midterms are tough. But the thing about moral victories is, and it's interesting, a participation trophy. I think of a moral victory plus $2.75 gets you a token on the subway. They don't even use tokens anymore, the MTA card. I think the Democrats are facing a potential problem with this division. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, we have been playing her. She's like the best advertisement for Republicans, but she's represents a wing of the Democratic Party that's very fervent, energetic, but it is not the Nancy Pelosi mainstream wing of let's get things done. There is a division within the Democratic Party that I think bodes well for Republicans. I don't think Trump or the Republicans are out of the woods by any means. But I do think that at this stage, with, less than 3 months to go before the election, the Democrats could be far more united, far more formidable. They have put up some good candidates. I think the guy who ran against Bolderson in Ohio, Danny Boy, was a good candidate. Came up short. I think that there'll be some marginal shifting as of right now. If I were handicapping, I say it's basically a wash. It'll be a divided
The
divided
one thing
house.
about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is it's not that conservatives are putting her on television and interviewing her all the time. The media has made her a star.
Exactly. What's being done with her is what CNN did with Trump. And they shined a spotlight on this unusual character, and they laugh. But remember who got the last laugh? It wasn't CNN. It was Trump. So remember, when you target somebody, often the target gets better because they're listening and they learn from the mistakes and they see what works. So she might grow precisely because of the sunlight. As for the ad, can I
ask you one question?
Sure.
And I don't mean to cut you off, but do you think a 50-year-old white guy is going to vote for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez under any circumstance?
Of course. I don't see it.
Of course, not any circumstances. But do you think that that's really going to happen?
Sure. Why not? I mean,
I don't see it. It's not going to.
I think you asked that question so you could answer it. That's what Geraldo does. No, but I think in terms of I believe for the Democrats, moral victories are to them real victories, and I hope they're undefeated with their moral victories because moral victories will not nominate a judge. Right. It will not reverse any executive orders. You won't get to the White House on a moral victory. Right. I'll take an immoral victory over a moral loss.
Jason, I want you to listen to Andrew Cuomo. He's telling Democrats to be less negative. Watch.
I would like to see the Democratic Party, frankly, be less negative because Trump is doing the best negative case that we could ever do, and start to be more affirmative about what the Democrats will do when we get in power. If you look back, I believe that's why the Democrats have lost in the past. We have not had a credible vision that people believed would make their life better. And people have to believe you can do it. It can't be abstract, theoretical, pie in the sky.
All right, are Democrats too negative?
Well, yes, but they don't have anything to go to. They are the resistance movement. They are scorched earth. They want to raise your taxes. They want to give the gavel back to Nancy Pelosi. And if you ask yourself at your home, what do Democrats stand for? What do they really want to do? The answer is they want to get rid of the tax cuts. They want to go back to these policies that don't make any sense. I don't think they have a positive message. And then the same Andrew Cuomo, we're going to talk about it later in the show, goes out and says, I'm not going to cooperate with ICE. Well, that doesn't sound like somebody who's trying to be positive.
The other thing, though, Morgan, is that as everybody complains about negative ads, but negative ads work. So if you're not in power, the only way to actually get your message across is to say that the other person is doing bad. Even if you want to get a positive message out there, in some ways, I guess Alexandria, for example, is going out talking about Medicare for all, free tuition, those types of things. Looks like a positive message, but if you're an independent voter, it might be a negative.
I just wish that people would quit comparing her to a beauty queen, because as a former beauty queen, I can say that everyone that I've worked with in the Miss America system is a hell of a lot smarter than her, or at least better at being on stage. Because I think she's terrible on television. I mean, look at the stuff that she says.
She's terrible because she hasn't thought through how to pay for the wonderful programs that she keeps proposing.
Right, well, because there is no way to pay for them without bankrupting the U.S. government. So listen, but what you're getting at is, who's motivated to come out to the polls in November, right? That's the real question. And I think even if they don't have a unifying message, I do think that Democrats are motivated to come out. So I think it's going to be a really long election night. It's going to be close in a lot of districts. But while I don't love the message, I do think that they are motivated. And I think that's why you're seeing the president get involved in these primary races and the races around the country, because quite frankly, he is what is most unifying, most
it's
motivating.
It's so interesting because right before the show, the president was doing a roundtable in New Jersey. He was talking about prison reform, and you would think that most Democrats would agree with him on that, like want to come to the table and actually work with him on that. It's something that actually could get done.
It wasn't even a round table. Did you notice that?
No, it's kind of rectangular.
It was a rectangular table. It was a rectangle table. But what you're talking about are the problems with the Democratic Party. Is not just the negative messaging, but also a lack of ideas. And so what the interesting thing about Trump is that he's open to almost any idea. And I mean, you saw that with North Korea is the ultimate example of being open to any idea. And I think he will be open to prison reform. He's open to even certain things about immigration that, I mean, granting essentially amnesty to over 1 million people. I want to bring up, I like to, I spend a lot of time in pharmacies, just for reasons that I can't get into. But the Democrat Party, when it comes to health care,
condoms,
they're throwing socialism around because they don't have any ideas. Meanwhile, you look at CVS, a drugstore, is unveiling a telemedicine app, right? This is going to allow you to go and see a doctor via, your whatever screen you have. That solves health care, not socialism, not free health care, not you could give Bernie Sanders trillions of dollars. He would not come up with an idea like telemedicine. This is going to be solved. All the problems are going to be solved by capitalism because capitalism replaces force with innovation, and the Democrats are still stuck on force, and they're scared of ideas and innovation.
The problem is that nobody on either side of the aisle is going to work with the other side of the aisle. Infrastructure, for instance, a no-brainer.
But that's why the private sector
get all kinds of kudos.
But that's why the private sector
let's have new highways, let's have new this.
But the private sector figures it out. Like that type of innovation, like you don't even have to have health insurance if you want to pay out of your pocket for the telemedicine from CVS, and that could solve a lot of problems.
Yeah, but I mean that is the solution. It isn't socialism, and the Democrats came up with specific ideas for once. It'd be kind of encouraging. Just once. Give us one idea.
Once. All right. Well, we'll see if they hear you and if they respond with one idea.
They watch this show.
Just one more idea. All right.
How about legalizing someone who's been here for 30 years and has citizen children?
Well, that was what Greg just said, that the president was open to.
Yeah, he was going to do that. And you're looking at some pretty progressive drug laws going on right now.
Yes, you are. All right. Well, we could keep going, but we have to move
let's keep going.
and then come back to you. A New York Times columnist urges the mainstream media to team up against President Trump, and Greg will tell you why.
I will.
You will. In the New York Times yesterday, Thomas Friedman wrote that instead of prattling on about issues like jobs or the great economy, the media should spotlight Trump's evil personality, because that'll help the Democrats by discouraging Republicans from backing Trump. He wrote, quote, "The whole country needs to see every tweet, every rally, every word, and every reaction so that they can ask themselves, is this who I want my kids to see as our president?" What a great idea. Because remember what happened the last time the media covered every tweet, every rally, every word, and every reaction of Donald Trump? when every wink, nudge, cough became part of the media's snarknado? They elected Donald Trump, the bozos. Yep, there were like 300 Republican candidates, but all the yahoos in the press chased the orange meteor precisely for the things they hate about him now. Trump was great TV. He was shocking. Screw Rick Perry, Rand Paul, and all those other nobodies. This guy makes chance into a sure thing. Trump got like $1 billion worth of free airtime, and not led by Fox News, who actually featured commentators who challenged Trump over his behavior and beliefs. It was CNN who led the charge, and assorted other drips who didn't seem to mind because they thought Hillary had it in the bag anyway, and they had no other way to get people to watch their boring, mindless coverage. So telling the media to focus on Trump's behavior, you're in effect saying, hey, remember how we elected Trump in 2016? Let's do it again. Isn't that true, Morgan? It seems like Friedman has amnesia. The more you focus on Trump, the better he does, I think.
It's interesting this advice is coming from people who it's like the most boring dinner party ever if you're with them. Like they're having a glass of expensive wine and they're like, isn't Trump awful? Yes. And so that's essentially, you're having people that have no understanding of social media and of how the president actually goes straight to the American people, advocating for the media covering him in general. I mean, this plays directly into his playbook, as you said. And I think, listen, I was on the other side of him in the primary, so I know what it's like for him to get all the media coverage. He did it brilliantly. He speaks directly to the American people, and I don't know what Friedman thinks he's doing, but I think the same people who read this in the Times are the same people who sit with him at their boring dinner parties and complain about the president.
Who'd you work for in the primary?
Jeb.
Oh. Yeah,
very interesting.
That didn't end well.
But I mean, no, but there were a lot of people at Fox who were on the other side.
Yeah.
So I mean, and the thing is, I was watching the amount of coverage on CNN and going, they're doing everything.
Not just CNN, but
MSNBC. Morning Joe should have been Morning Trump.
Absolutely.
Unlike Fox and Friends. Of course. I love Fox and Friends. I'm up every morning. Who should I talk to next? Jason, I'm looking at your face and I'm thinking, what's in your brain? What are you thinking? Is it good to get personal?
One of the biggest disappointments when I came into Congress in 2008, when I got to the end, is the lack of objective media. And I've seen how they totally changed the rules, because things that they wouldn't cover under Barack Obama, they now want to cover incessantly with Donald Trump. They have totally flipped the equation. And to be in a contrived way actually advocating, hey, look, this is what we need to do so we can all get together on the same page, is so contrived. There are very few media outlets that I really trust in that. When you want to read the paper in the morning, people always ask. I think the Wall Street Journal gives it the fairest, straightest, objective viewpoint. But, gone are the days of a New York Times or somebody like that will objectively actually give you just the straight up news.
I believe that's owned by our parent company.
I believe
Can we say
so.
that?
I am a subscriber.
Oh, well done.
I
steal your paper.
Remember that between 2000 and 2008, it was the same.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, this is when the media was like, they have to fight against President Bush on everything. Every issue, every utterance, was amplified. And then, as Greg has pointed out, that they were asleep during the Obama years.
Obama-tose.
But this is what I think, that there has been some journalism that has had an effect on the Trump administration. If you look at the HHS, former HHS Secretary Tom Price, he had to resign after that reporting. The New York Times and others, mainly the New York Times, focusing on Scott Pruitt at the EPA. That was journalism that they didn't focus on President Trump. They were just doing their journalism, and they had an effect. I would also say that they spent...
But so did Pruitt. Pruitt had an effect. That's why they went after him. I mean, he was doing some good stuff, right?
But that good stuff is still...
he was doing stupid stuff, too.
You can do good policy without the other, which Andy Kessler is doing now. The other thing I would say is, if they cover every tweet and every utterance, then they're not covering all the other stuff. So there's limited room in the newspaper, and if they just want to do the tweets, they can do that, and all the other stuff goes under the radar.
Yeah.
What people like Tom Friedman, who's a bright guy, but he's dead wrong on this.
You have a better mustache.
What they don't get is that Trump is a movie star. He's got charisma. You mentioned Jeb Bush. I like Jeb a lot. I mean, I had interviewed him a bunch of times when he was governor. But next to Trump, it was like it was vanilla next to a banana split with a cherry on top.
He did that one by one through the primary and just took everybody out.
And because they couldn't compete with someone with that kind of charisma. Now, you can hate Trump, you can love Trump, but the thing is, there is a magnetism about him. The more you see him, and he doesn't blow the world up, you say, hey, maybe he's not so bad. The economy is okay, really good, in fact, and we're not at war with North Korea. It may work out. The Iranians, what have they done? They haven't really hurt us. And the more he's around, I think, the more people get used to him. I think it really works in Trump's favor.
But what's surprising to me about the piece is that Friedman sort of, he put it out there that the media is not for the president. He sort of said the media should be against the president.
He was honest.
Me. I thought, is he admitting that the fake news that the president
remember the time he was honest and he said, I wish we could be China for a day.
Yes.
So we could get all sorts of things done. And then everybody went after him for saying, oh, you like the Chinese.
Every now and then he lets it slip. He pulls back the curtain, and we see what we really know to be true. All right. Nancy Pelosi's outrageous new plan to help illegal immigrants. Find out what it is next.
listening.
Nancy Pelosi adding fuel to the raging debate over immigration. The House Minority Leader urging voters to back Democratic candidates in the midterms to help her party's immigration agenda.
We are not going to be able to get it done under the Republican leadership in Congress. We believe that we will have leverage when we win in November. And why that's important? Because it gives leverage to every family, to every mom who courageously brought her child across the desert to escape.
That's the minority leader in El Paso, the Democratic governor of New York, slamming ICE with this new threat.
I will do nothing cooperatively with ICE. I have sent them letters asking for an investigation. I have said if they do any criminal acts, which a police force can do, we will take criminal action against ICE because I believe they are politically motivated.
Let me ask you, Congressman, did you leave Congress because of your frustration that the two bodies and the two sides could not work together?
That was a big part of it. I mean, something like immigration, I had passed a bill dealing with immigration, 385 votes in the House. Very bipartisan. The Senate didn't even take it up. And the Harry Reid folks came over and said, hey, you know what? The reason we're not going to do is we can't allow Republicans to have a victory on immigration. And it's terribly frustrating. It is wrong. But I think those messages are fundamentally wrong. And I do believe the polling that the number one issue going into the midterm will actually be immigration. There are only 8 congressional days left in the House of Representatives. They have to pass a continuing resolution or an omnibus. And the president has laid down the law. There is going to be funding in there, or I will veto that bill. And that has to happen before the election.
Do you take him at his word that he's actually going to shut down the government? And if you shut down the government, how do you get it reopened? What happens to reopen once you shut it?
This is why I think they need to make the case to the American people. There's no reason out of a $4 trillion annual budget, you can't put in there $25 billion to fund the wall. And if you extrapolate that over 10 years, we're talking 40 trillion.
I'll give you $25 billion for the wall if you give me a green light for the Dreamers.
I think what the president has offered goes far beyond what he promised in the election. He's actually agreed to do that sort of thing.
So you would allow what many in the party call amnesty for the Dreamers?
I reject the amnesty. I don't think you have to put them on a pathway to citizenship, but I do think you can give them some legal status so that they have the certainty. But you got to get rid of the rewards and incentives to be here illegally. And what Nancy Pelosi is doing in El Paso is morally wrong to encourage people to cross that desert, put their lives on line. They should be going to a U.S. embassy in El Salvador rather than putting life in peril.
Are you shocked, Morgan, that the abolish ICE plank has gained such credibility in the Democratic mainstream?
I am shocked. You know about the Democrat mainstream more than I do. I think by
I'm not a Democrat.
By the moderate victories in Michigan and Ohio from the Democrat Party, I think that the moderates have won in that part. The thing that surprises me so much is I've worked very closely for the past over a decade with people at DHS and ICE when I was in government in my reserve capacity. And these are people that, that sign up to serve their government, to serve it faithfully. And I sort of see what's happening to ICE is the same thing that I think we saw, several years ago the Democrats doing to police around America. So it was okay to bash the police a few years ago. Now it's okay to bash ICE. If you want to talk about reforming the institution, that's fine. We need reform all day, every day, in many government institutions. But to disparage people who raise their hand and take an oath to serve our country is flat out disgusting.
I agree with Jason's proposal, Dana, that immigration is the biggest issue, because I think it encapsulates a lot of other things like race and jobs and social class and all the rest of it. But which image is more powerful? The classic image of a brown wave overwhelming the southern border, all these immigrants coming in and ruining our quality of life, or ICE going into peaceable homes and going after, Diego Garcia, who's been a gardener here for 30 years, and he married an American citizen, and his children are all born here and they're in public school. Which image is more powerful? And won't that, in Jason's words?
I guess it depends on where you sit, right? So I think that the wave is definitely probably the more powerful image as the president paints it. But, like earlier this week, there was a story about a Marine whose wife, who had come here illegally 30 years ago or something, they have 2 children. He has served in Iraq 3 times. She got deported. And that story, it was an AP story, but it doesn't get a ton of coverage. But if you get enough of those, then you might actually start to see some pushback. I actually think that President Trump, if the Republicans lose the House, his chances of getting an immigration bill that he could live with and that he could support and that would be good for the country is more possible than if the Republicans keep the House.
Why?
Because the Republicans have shown over and over that they're not willing to make a deal, and also because of what Jason just said, because the Democrats are saying, well, we can't give the Republicans a win. Think of what Newt Gingrich did in 1996 with Bill Clinton on welfare reform. It was a big issue. What did that do? It helped President Clinton win re-election because it basically changes the paradigm. So it's not that this can't get done if nothing else, if the Republicans lose. I actually think it's more likely it gets done because of Trump.
Where do you stand on that? I don't know. I mean, which of those images really grips you?
See, I reject the black and white nature of this conversation. You can hold a number of stances, competing stances on immigration. It's just like a stock portfolio, okay? Yeah. So you can be for a process that enables safe, legal immigration while curbing illegal immigration or other types of immigration. When you say something like that, you feed into the media's gaping maw, and it turns into you hate foreigners. It's either you are for this or you are against this, and if you're for laws, something is wrong with you. That's not how it is. You can hold a number of different positions, and it all makes sense. For example, the difference between the right and the left are laws. The difference in the immigration debate is the stance of abiding a law. The conservatives, Republicans want you to abide by the law. The left are saying no, 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 sanctuary, sanctuary. People are fleeing. Refugees are fleeing countries precisely because there are laws missing. The reason why they're coming to America is because our laws create order, which enables freedom that allows people to live their lives in safety. If you look at Somalia, which has no laws, the Congo, Venezuela, which was chaos, yep. They have no laws. You got to get out. So I think when people are
that whole got to obey the law stuff is such BS. I really think it is such cover.
That's not
it's such cover.
What am I covering, Geraldo?
You're avoiding dealing with the issue of where are you in terms of.
I just explained to you the issue. You totally ignored what I said.
What are you
okay, let me explain it to you one more time, and I'll do it slow. You can have competing. You can have competing notions about immigration. You can be for legal immigration because you want more immigrants here. I'm that guy. And if there's I'm even for a pathway to citizenship. However, I believe that illegal immigration is breaking the law. If you can somehow
so
adjust
is speeding.
That. Yeah, and I'm against speeding too. I'm sure you're not, though, Geraldo. You probably speed without a shirt.
The sit-down showdown intensifies. President is telling Americans, thanks for the pen. Stay tuned as his legal team attacks the Mueller probe.
You don't pull a mask off an old Lone Ranger, and you don't mess around with Jim.
Oh, you gave me Van Halen. I'm impressed. President Trump tweeting, stay tuned, while slamming the so-called rigged witch hunt as his legal team continues to attack the special counsel.
I've never been involved in an investigation on either side that's more illegitimate. If it isn't over by September, then we have a very, very serious violation of the Justice Department rules that you shouldn't be conducting one of these investigations in the 60-day period. The real story here is not that this case isn't going to fizzle. It's going to blow up on them. There's a lot more to what they did that nobody knows about yet.
Right.
Giuliani also saying drawn-out negotiations over a potential interview with the president could benefit the GOP in the midterms. Dana, what say you?
So then we should keep the investigation going through September to help the midterms, rather than saying that it should be wrapped up by September. They got to take their pick.
They're given a chance to wrap this thing
and also,
up.
I just remember that Senator Grassley, when he interviewed, when he had Comey there to testify, he said, "Why did you let a date drive your decision on an investigation into Hillary Clinton? That's inappropriate. The investigation should finish when it finishes, and you shouldn't have tried to do that." So anyway, they're a little bit.
And Geraldo, they're going to have a hard time with that argument in light of what happened to Hillary Clinton. I mean, the Democrats aren't going to buy into that. But how do you see this playing out in the midterms?
I think, first of all, the attack on Hillary Clinton during Benghazi is why her candidacy had legs anyway. I thought it was a big mistake by the Republicans. Went way overboard. And I think that you wish you could have redone that.
More people were killed.
coming from.
Not by Hillary Clinton.
To quote Geraldo, that's BS.
She was just, oh my goodness. We're switching topics.
I like it though.
In terms of the Mueller investigation of the president, the one thing I want to say, and if the president credits my advice even to the slightest degree, I hope he listens to me. Do not testify before Mueller's investigation. It is a trap. It is absolute. It's a landmine you cannot survive. For example, I say it's a perjury trap. Here's the question. I'm Mueller. You're the president. You ever cheat on your wife, Mr. President? What's your answer? What's your answer? You got to answer.
Jason looks really nervous right now.
You know,
I've never cheated on my wife.
He cannot put himself in. I don't care. Mueller could promise the world the velvet gloves. Going to take good care of you.
And based on your Benghazi answer, your time has expired.
I forgot what we're talking about.
What's the effect on the midterms?
Oh, okay.
Is this really going to? I mean, if Giuliani's saying that there's a lot more information that's going to come out here, but do we really? Does this motivate? You mentioned earlier the motivation is what drives turnout, and do people say, "Hey, we got to get out there and protect our president"?
I think what law enforcement has to be careful about, as proven by Jim Comey the most, is that they're not politicians and they don't understand politics. And as you talked about Hillary Clinton, I think if we brought anyone from her campaign on right now, they would blame Jim Comey, right, for what he did, a few weeks before the election. So I do think that Mueller has to be careful, and I do think that even though he has a lot of credibility, there's legitimate reasons when the president says there's 17 angry Democrats and people that attended Hillary's election night party and people who donated. For the average American watching it, my problem with that is that we have lost, both sides at different points, has lost faith and credibility in the FBI and in the DOJ, and I don't think that's a good thing. I think during the election, Democrats were mad at the FBI. Now Republicans are. And it's not good for this to be partisan. We need to have a set of rules where they say, okay, there is no standard, right? There's only the memo written in 2012 from the then Attorney General. So we need to have a standard as we get closer to elections. What is the standard that we're all going by? Am I really boring you that much?
Yeah, we only had 30 seconds left.
Go ahead. I'm suffering from investigation fatigue. I think I can speak for all of America that they would rather do my laundry than hear about this investigation anymore. Remember Beckel? He used to boycott segments. He'd just go like this.
Yeah, which segments did he boycott?
Benghazi. I'm boycotting. And for good reason. No one cares. America, you know this. You don't care. You don't care about this collusion stuff because you know it's
Can I add one?
BS.
Can I add one last thing?
You know it's BS.
John Yoo, who we all know is a legal scholar, he teaches at Berkeley now. So he was on the 2 o'clock show today. It surprised me, but he said he believes the president should testify. And this is coming from John Yoo, but he said he's the chief law enforcement officer in the land and he should do it.
The right answer is the president will testify because he does things very differently than any advice he gets. The mobile device dilemma are smartphones leading to the death of conversations.
Are smartphones killing conversations? A new study says it's trending that way. According to British researchers, we're talking to each other less on our mobile phones despite our addiction to these devices. Popular messaging apps like Skype and Snapchat are slashing the amount of time spent on traditional voice calls. So, is this the beginning of the end for verbal communication? Dana, wait, hold on.
You're going to call me?
You're gonna write your letter? Yeah. So anyway, that was my attempt.
Yeah, I mean, there's all these studies, right? That people prefer. That they think it's rude to call now, right? And
I think so.
But the thing is, if you called, it would take less time to communicate your message than if you were texting 5 times to figure out where you were in the park to hook up or meet up, whatever.
Whoa, Dana.
Meet up. I just meant meet.
Hooking up in the park, hey. Hooking up in the park.
Rock and roll, Dana.
I also was going to say.
First she started swearing, now she's hooking up in the park.
What else is she doing?
Going on at the park.
I also wanted to commend Arthur Brooks has a new podcast. He's the head of AEI, and he talked about this whole problem about phones killing conversation. And one of the things he talked about was how humans evolved and that we have a voice and that our voice is a tool. And so that was how you know that Greg's telling a joke. If he just texts you something you don't know,
No, that's what
but you
emojis
use
are
your
for.
voice in order to do that.
That's why you use an emoji. Jason, I feel like you're all going to school me as the millennial on the panel.
Well, the short answer is yes, and I love that we're still calling them smartphones because it's not like there's a lot of dumb ones out there anymore. They do almost everything you could possibly want them to do. My biggest concern is how it's going to change, particularly a younger generation. I think sporting events with the Supreme Court ruling, it's going to totally change how you watch sports now that gaming is going to happen on those phones. You're going to be, hey, is he going to make the free throw or not? And people betting $5. It's going to totally change that. And I'm really worried what the government and private companies are doing with facial recognition. Government already has 1 out of every 2 people is already in a database at the FBI.
Jason,
I don't trust
you're taking
that.
this way too seriously.
No, but I totally worry about this. I lose sleep over this stuff.
Chill out. Okay, do you use sleep over your smartphone?
What I don't do is have voice messages on my phone.
Oh, I hate that.
didn't set up my phone at all for voice messages.
Agreed.
Because I found what people do is they want to make a point. You have to go pick up the garbage, and then they say, okay. And you have no chance to respond, to rebut, to deny, so I don't. As a result, I don't have a lot of talking on my telephone.
Greg, if I call
not set up
you-
the voice.
Yes.
If I call you, Greg, will you answer the phone?
Of course I would. You know, they said this also prevents conversations, which is great because whenever I see like Kilmeade coming down the hall and he's like about to talk to me, I'm like this.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. And then I do that. I am so good at impersonating serious, angry phone call because no one interrupts an angry phone call when you're like, look, I told you already. The tests were negative. And then no one will go near you. But by the way, we had this conversation about video games 20 years ago. 48 years ago was TV. 200,000 years ago, it was about the destructive impact of cave drawings. So whenever there's technology, we'll always get these fears. But what this is just an external drive for your brain. You have everything in the universe in this thing. You got every book, so you don't have to keep it in here.
Well, I think that talking on the phone is weird because I'm a millennial. So talking on the phone is
Are you
for
a
my
millennial?
Granny, I love you.
How many
and I
times
will
do you want to
always
tell us
talk
you're
to you on the phone.
Like, we get it. Are you age shaming the rest of us at the
No,
table?
it's because I'm actually I'm a really old millennial and I want to hold on to my youth because I kind of am not one.
I'm Gen X.
Me too.
Yeah?
The big fear I have is that people are missing the real world because their heads are buried.
That's true.
And the world is great.
And the world is great.
But this is better.
Butterflies and
Emojis are great too. Okay.
Yes.
Well, one more thing is up next.
I know when that hotline blink, that can only mean one thing. I know when that hotline blink.
Your turn. Are smartphones killing conversations? A new study says it's trending that way. According to British researchers, we're talking to each other less on our mobile phones despite our addiction to these devices. Popular messaging apps like Skype and Snapchat are slashing the amount of time spent on traditional voice calls. So, is this the beginning of the end for verbal communication? Dana, wait, hold on.
You're going to call me?
You're gonna write your letter? Yeah. So anyway, that was my attempt.
Yeah, I mean, there's all these studies, right? That people prefer. They think it's rude to call now, right? And I think so. But the thing is, if you called, it would take less time to communicate your message than if you were texting 5 times to figure out where you were in the park to hook up or meet up, whatever.
Whoa, Dana.
Meet up. I just meant meet.
Hooking up in the park, hey. Hooking up in the park.
Rock and roll, Dana.
I also was going to say.
First she started swearing, now she's hooking up in the park.
What else is she doing?
on at the
I also wanted to commend Arthur Brooks has a new podcast. He's the head of AEI, and he talked about this whole problem about phones killing conversation. And one of the things he talked about was how humans evolved and that we have a voice and that our voice is a tool. And so that was how you know that Greg's telling a joke. If he just texts you something you don't know,
No, that's what
but you
emojis
use
are
your
for.
voice in order to do that.
That's why you use an emoji. Jason, I feel like you're all going to school me as the millennial on the panel.
Well, the short answer is yes, and I love that we're still calling them smartphones because it's not like there's a lot of dumb ones out there anymore. They do almost everything you could possibly want them to do. My biggest concern is how it's going to change, particularly a younger generation. I think sporting events with the Supreme Court ruling, it's going to totally change how you watch sports now that gaming is going to happen on those phones. You're going to be, hey, is he going to make the free throw or not? And people betting $5. It's going to totally change that. And I'm really worried what the government and private companies are doing with facial recognition. Government already has 1 out of every 2 people is already in a database at the FBI.
Jason,
I don't trust
you're taking
that.
this way too seriously.
No, but I totally worry about this. I lose sleep over this stuff.
Chill out. Okay, do you use sleep over your smartphone?
What I don't do is have voice messages on my phone.
Oh, I hate that.
didn't set up my phone at all for voice messages.
Agreed.
Because I found what people do is they want to make a point. You have to go pick up the garbage, and then they say, okay. And you have no chance to respond, to rebut, to deny, so I don't. As a result, I don't have a lot of talking on my telephone.
Greg, if I
not
call
set
you,
up the voice.
Yes.
If I call you, Greg, will you answer the phone?
Of course I would. You know, they said this also prevents conversations, which is great because whenever I see like Kilmeade coming down the hall and he's like about to talk to me, I'm like this.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. And then I do that. I'm so good at impersonating serious, angry phone call because no one interrupts an angry phone call when you're like, look, I told you already the tests were negative, and then no one will go near you. But by the way, we had this conversation about video games 20 years ago. 48 years ago was TV. 200,000 years ago, it was about the destructive impact of cave drawings. So whenever there's technology, we'll always get these fears. But what this is just an external drive for your brain. You have everything in the universe in this thing. You got every book, so you don't have to keep it in here.
Well, I think that talking on the phone is weird because I'm a millennial. So talking on the phone is
Are you a millennial?
Granny, I love you.
How many times do you want to tell us you're
a
millennial? Like, we get it. Are you age shaming the rest of us at the table?
No, it's because I'm actually I'm a really old millennial and I want to hold on to my youth because I kind of am not one.
I'm Gen X.
Me too.
Yeah?
The big fear I have is that people are missing the real world because their heads are buried.
That's true.
And the world is great.
And the world is great.
But this is better.
Butterflies and
Emojis
mountains.
are great too. Okay.
Yes.
Well, one more thing is up next.
I know when that hotline bling, that can only mean one thing. I know when that hotline bling.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dana Perino, along with Morgan Ortagus, Geraldo Rivera, Jason Chaffetz, and Greg Gutfeld. It's 5 o'clock in New York City, and this is The Five. The RNC is trolling Democrats for appearing to come up short in Ohio's 12th district special election, a race that's still too close to call.
Close in Ohio, 12, but no cigar, at least not yet.
This is a moral victory for the Democrats. The fact that they're this close is a moral victory for the Democrats. You want a real victory.
We got some mojo, all right? So I don't know if it's a moral victory or whatever.
Moral victory does not get you an office in Washington.
Karl Rove reacting to the election results by saying the blue wave could be receding and Republicans have a fighting chance to keep the House majority. This comes as more Democrats are distancing themselves from party leader Nancy Pelosi.
Would you back Pelosi for Speaker if you win and are in the House?
Well, I think, again, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves. As you mentioned, I got to win my race first, but we got to take a look at what's going on. We got to take a look at winning the House back in November. And then once the House is won, we have to make that decision from there.
Will you vote for Nancy Pelosi?
Probably not.
Probably not.
That's my answer. No, probably not. She doesn't speak about the issues that are important to the families of the 13th congressional district.
All right, Jason, Nancy Pelosi's got a lot of high tolerance for this kind of thing. She doesn't ever get in the middle. She just lets them say what they want because she wants to win.
Oh, she's keeping track. Are you kidding?
Oh, she's keeping track, but she keeps quiet.
She's got a tally.
Right.
Don't be fooling anybody. And you know what? It is a legitimate question because it's the very first thing you do as a new member of Congress. You have to go in front of the entire body and call out who is it that you're going to vote for. And the reality is the Democrats, they lack leadership. I don't think they have the right policies. And to the point of the piece beforehand, I don't think there is some big wave that's coming from the Democrats. I sat there in 2010, the year after the election after coming from the Democrats. I sat there in 2010, the year after the election after Barack Obama. They took, I think it was a net of 63 seats that switched hands, and there was this big tsunami, and I don't see any evidence evidence of it happening this time.
All right. I was so excited to talk politics. I didn't do what I meant to do, which is to introduce Morgan.
Yeah, nice
to
work.
all of you and to the audience.
So
I was like,
rude.
very rude. I'm very rude. I'm known for that, really, to being very rude. Morgan, welcome.
Thank you.
Tell us a little about yourself. Where are you from?
Well, I'm thrilled to be here. I've been